Hey guys, welcome to another video. Recently we checked out the NVIDIA GeForce GTX 285 and today we're checking out 2 in SLI. Now this is a setup back in the day I would only dream of having such a system. Usually when I look at the charts, all the way down is what I actually had, and GTX 285 in SLI was definitely something I lusted after. We were looking at around $800 just for the 2 video cards. On top of that, you needed a SLI compatible mainboard and a fairly decent CPU to make sure that these video cards are being fed with enough information. So in this video, we will check out some benchmarks. We've got some games, but also we're looking at power consumption, temperature, and fan speed. And we will spend a little bit of time on the components and also how to set up the software. So this is the main board I ended up going with, and I had a few options. I could have gone with a LGA775 mainboard, but it turns out it's too old. It only supports Pentium 4 CPUs, nothing from the Core 2 generation. Then I tried using one of these Chinese X79 mainboards, but I just could not get SLI to work. Later on, I found a few more guides, but I was running out of time. Maybe in a future video, we will be checking that out. So I went with an AMD AM3 Plus system. It's a mainboard from Gigabyte, the GA990FXA UD5, and this board is SLI certified. It worked without any issues. I flashed the latest BIOS, version F12, and I loaded the BIOS defaults. I didn't run into any issues apart from when I opened GPU-Z and I had a look at the 2 GTX 285s, and one card, the second card in the second PCI Express slot, was only running at 8x speed. And so I went back into the BIOS and I assumed maybe some of the other resources are gobbling up some PCI Express lanes. So I disabled Firewire and also disabled the secondary SATA controller. This board has an additional SATA controller. And lo and behold, now both video cards are working at PCI Express 2.0 with 16x speed. This board can do 3-way SLI. It has a ton of PCI Express slots. The AMD 990FX chipset, we have a total of 8 SATA 3 ports, 4 DDR memory slots, decent chipset cooling, and I had no issues using this board. We have heaps of port at the back. There's a PS2 port here, optical audio out. We have USB and USB 3 ports as well as eSATA ports and also Firewire, Gigabit Ethernet and audio. With the processor, I was debating between using a Phenom 2 or a AMD FX processor. In the end, I'm going with my favorite AMD FX, which is the FX 6300. This one has 3 modules, 6 threads, or 6 cores if you want to follow AMD's advertising. And we have a base clock of 3.5 gigahertz, but it can boost up to 3.8. And this is the memory we're using. I bought this memory kit earlier in the year because I kept getting comments that I don't use fast enough memory for the AM3 Plus platform. I selected the XMP profile. It runs at 1866 megahertz with 10, 11, 10, 30 timings. 8 GB of RAM is plenty for the games that we will be testing. I have confirmed that it runs in dual channel configuration. I also got comments in past videos that the memory might be in the wrong slots, but I checked the manual and yes, it does look a bit weird, but it is running in dual channel memory configuration. For cooling, we're using this 125 watt AMD cooler. It's basically the Rave cooler without the fancy shroud. You can buy it from Amazon. That's where I bought 2 from. And of course, we keep using the graphite thermal pad. Works wonderfully with this project and saves me from mucking around with thermal paste and removing it. And this is the power supply we're using. You might remember seeing this in a previous video. I got this from China. It's a Bitcoin power supply with a rating of 1600 watts. And I think it can drive 6 or 8 of these GTX 285 cards. Heaps of ports where you can drive all sorts of video cards. And yeah, it's a little bit sketchy. It has no fan control. It goes full blast, but it worked fine. I've tested this power supply with even more demanding video cards. Haven't had a single issue. So yep, it served its purpose for this video, so to speak. I have some power rating figures. Sitting idle on the desktop, the entire machine consumes 127 watts, but running games, I saw readings of over 400 watts. 430 was what I saw when you run a game that utilizes SLI in a good fashion. Seeing that we're using 2 video cards from Gigabyte, I also have a SLI bridge from Gigabyte. This one supports 3-way SLI, but you can also use it for just 2 graphics cards. So what about temperatures, fan speed, and noise? So these cards are built to be configured in such a fashion. There's not much gap between the cards, but they exhaust the hot air out the back, and wow, do they get hot. So here we have me recording all the temperatures, and in the background we've got Crysis Warhead running, and the temperatures will hit 92 degrees. The GPU fan speed, this card here will run at 100%, and the RPM are 3600 RPM, so it makes quite a racket. This card here has a little bit more airflow. The fan will spin up to 80%, and in RPM that's 2900 RPM. So this is without me maintaining the cards. I didn't open them up and reapplied thermal paste, so very likely there's a bit of tuning you can do. The megahertz, the frequency, I did not see any throttling, but 92 degrees and 100% fan speed is definitely something to keep in mind. You want to use a very well ventilated case, that is for sure. Windows 7 is really straightforward to install. You just extract the contents of the ISO onto a USB flash drive. However, I like using the Easy to Boot project. It creates a bootable flash drive, and I've got images for Windows XP, Vista, and 7 on there, so I continued using that solution. Installation was fine. It automatically supports SSDs with the partition alignment, so that wasn't an issue at all. Next up, we have the drivers. I like using the Snappy Driver Installer Origin, and it is fully compatible with Windows 7 64-bit. This time I installed all the drivers that the utility recommended. I later, after reboot, manually installed the latest AMD chipset drivers and also manually installed the latest NVIDIA drivers. We're using Forceware 342.01, which is the latest download from the NVIDIA website. After I installed the video cards, a pop-up appeared, and there's an option to enable SLI for maximum 3D performance. So before looking at games, I wanted to see some benchmarks and comparing using a single card to 2 cards in SLI. In 3D Mark 06, we're testing at 1920 by 1200, just to give these video cards a bit of a workout. Unfortunately, this benchmark seems to be too old. I saw very little scaling. There was one benchmark, however, the Canyon Flight. Here the FPS increased from 62 to 113, but that was the only test in 3D Mark 06 where I saw decent scaling. Next up, we have 3D Mark Vantage, and here we saw much better results. Once again, at 1920 by 1200. In the first GPU test, we're going from around 21 to 39 FPS, and then the second one from around 16 to 30 FPS. So that's almost perfect doubling of performance. Okay, so let's check out a few games, and I believe all of them are from GOG because there is no need for DRM. You can just copy them on a USB hard drive and install them. First off, we have BioShock, and here I got some issues. Changing the resolution or VSync causes the game to crash. Also in the game, no audio. I found a solution for the VSync issue. I just turned it off in the NVIDIA driver. And what can we see? Yeah, both video cards seeing around 90% of usage. So SLI is working really well in this game, and we're getting over 200 FPS at times. So this works really well. The audio still didn't work, but I did see a solution on the PC Gaming Wiki website. Far Cry 2 is next. And yeah, another game that works really well with SLI. 90% utilization on both GPUs, and we're getting 100 FPS. Yeah, so that looks beautifully. I remember we tested this game on a single GTX 285, and it was just not powerful enough to hold the 60 FPS. Also, we're using a higher resolution in this video, 1920 by 1200 in all the games, apart from Crysis. Those games only offered full HD. But yeah, Far Cry 2 with GTX 285 and SLI, beautiful performance. Race driver grid is next. We're seeing around 80% CPU utilization. This might be an indicator that the CPU is a little bit too weak to feed enough information to the GPU. The GPU load, you can see it in MSI Afterburner, but because this is a AMD FX, it's got some shared resources, it's hard to tell if the clock speed is just not high enough, the single thread performance. Yeah, it's very difficult to find out. And yeah, we're getting over 100 FPS, so very good performance. Fallout 3, I got a lot of comments about testing this game, and it was a little bit frustrating for me because yeah, I couldn't find a way to leave the bunker. If you know what to do, let me know. So that was a waste of 10 minutes or 15 minutes of just trying to play the game and get outside, because inside it doesn't seem to be very demanding. Both video cards do get utilized, but not very much. The processor also says it's not really getting much of a workout, so I'm not quite sure what's going on with this game. Stalker, Shadow of Chernobyl. What a good game. I have some really good memories playing this game. And yeah, around 100 FPS. The GPU load is a little bit low with around 70%. So maybe there's another bottleneck, maybe the processor, I'm not sure. But that's another game that works pretty well with SLI. A game we haven't tested before on the channel. We got Dragon Age Origin. We're seeing over 100 FPS. And again, SLI is being utilized only to around 70 FPS. So that's another game where we're not seeing 90-95% of utilization, just around 70. But both GPUs are working hard in this game and we're getting very decent FPS. And here we have Mafia 2. Also another game that I haven't tested in this channel. So going with more modern systems with Windows Vista and Windows 7, we now have to look at some more modern games. Yeah, most of the games I have ready to go and played in the past are from the Windows XP era, but I had to find some games that I can actually take advantage of all these graphics horsepower. And yeah, around 100 FPS plays perfectly fine and smooth, and also both video cards are getting good utilization. So this is a really nice system with two GTX 285s in SLI, but does it run Crysis? That is the question. And let's have a look. It runs Crysis fairly well. Now, we're not using Windows XP this time, so under Windows 7 64-bit, we can use the very high details, which will enable some DirectX 10 features. And from past tests, these game options will utilize the CPU quite a bit. It relies on a single thread with a high IPC and a high clock speed. Unfortunately, this is one of the weaknesses of the FX 6300. So in some scenes, we're not getting that great of performance. But it runs Crysis fairly well, and you can lower the details a little bit and you have some decent performance. Crysis Warhead is said to be a little bit more optimized, and that game also runs really well. This is a good game to give the GPUs a nice workout. I definitely could hear the fan spin up, and one GPU, the fan going ballistic at 3600 RPM. So guys, what is the verdict of building a retro gaming PC around GTX 285 in SLI? Definitely, they are loud, they are hot, they consume a lot of power, but it is very cool. This is the system. Back in the day, I could just dream of that level of performance. And yeah, back in the day, if you had lots of money and you wanted the best, then this is something you could have put together. And yeah, you would have a experience that people using like a mainstream GTX 260 just could only dream about. And you can crank up the resolution in all the games. We ran 1920 by 1200. You can also try to enabling some anti-aliasing in a lot of games. These video cards are powerful enough. Now, I got some comments on the VRAM. These cards have 1 GB of VRAM. There are versions with double that. So very likely if you had such a system, you would have been able to hold on to it for a long time. They don't support DirectX 11, so with those games at a certain time period, games will start not to work on this GPU. But for retro PC gaming, they are wonderful, and you can test games that are even a little bit more modern. In terms of the platform, and this is where I would love some tips and hints. If you're using one of these Chinese X79 or X58 main boards, and you found an easy way to make SLI work, do let me know. I have a feeling that the FX 6300 CPU in some games does not have enough IPC to really push these video cards to its limits. So if you know any tips, I might revisit this project. RAM, high-speed memory is recommended for this platform. This time I didn't do any overclocking, raising the frontside bus and anything like that, but there is more performance to be had. This is a really nice platform for tweaking, and the FX series CPU, they love fast memory and also the hyper transfer interface, I believe what it's called. So yeah, what an interesting platform. And what should we look at in future videos? What about a three-way SLI? Although I might hold out until I have a better CPU, something stronger, I had a look at Gigabyte X58 mainboards from AliExpress. They are around 120 Australian dollars, so not too bad to be honest. And that might be a really cool platform for playing around with SLI, because it still supports Windows XP and you don't have to hack around with modded SLI drivers and anything like that, which I appreciate. And yeah, that's really it for this project. So hopefully you enjoyed it. We played around with two GTX 285s in SLI and performance was outstanding. I was also surprised how smooth SLI is working. I didn't run into any issues. The only issue was that in the beginning, one of the video cards was running with 8 PCI Express lanes, but by disabling some onboard resources, which was FireWire and the secondary SATA controller, everything worked fine. And yeah, what about Windows 7? Is it fair to call it retro? Probably not. You're gonna throw something at the screen if I do that. But yeah, you let me know. And that's it for this project, guys. If you found this video interesting and you haven't subscribed yet, yeah, please do so. Give it a like, leave a comment. I really want to hear your thoughts. And I see you soon in a future video.